Welcome to RetroSec Technical Training presentation. My name is Vishal, and in this session, we will be looking at some basics of protecting data using retrospect, and then we're going to also look at some new features that are recently added to retrospect backups. Right, so at this point, you should be able to see my screen, and what you see on the screen is called retrospect or retrospect console. So this is like a server end of the software. The retrospect software has two core components. One is, we call it retrospect or retrospect console, and the second component is called retrospect client. So let me bring up a client control panel just to show you how it looks like. So I'll switch the screen. And what you see on the screen now is a retrospect client control panel. This component you install on all your network computers that you want to back up, whether that is a desktop operating system or server operating system, doesn't matter. You are treating it as a backup client. So you install the retrospect client software onto the endpoints that you want to protect. Once it is installed, then you can configure everything from within the central console. And switching back to the console. Now, the very first thing you might want to do is to, in case of you have a network and you have multiple endpoints, in that case, you might want to do, you might want to build your client database first. So you go to configure, go to clients, and these are the computers that I already have added. These are my backup clients. If I want to add a new backup client, I can click on add button. And by default, retrospect will be using multicast method. So with multicast, you will be able to see the computers or backup clients that are on the same IP subnet as the backup server is in. And just checking if I have, okay, that was some comment. Like I said, you can use question and answer window, Q&A window, if you want to post any question. So coming back to 1 minute, let me put this window up front so we won't be missing out anything. And it will take just a second. Let me move it aside and we are good to go. Okay, so when you visit when you click on the add button, you are presented a view of your live network, and you can see retrospect is currently using multicast method. With that, you will be able to see all the clients that are on the same IP subnet as the backup server is on. So there is a question, what about if my server IP range is different than the client WAN? Right, I'm coming to your question, Yogesh. And so the limitation is because your routers won't forward the multicast packets onto different subnets. That is how the networks are supposed to be working. And so the multicast traffic is limited to your local subnet only. In case you have clients in multiple IP subnets, you can click on the advanced button below, and that will present you two additional methods. And one of the method is subnet broadcast method, where you can enter in the subnet information. You can add as many subnets as you want, and you can mention the subnet address and the subnet mask. And then retrospect will look out for the clients using layer 3 broadcast into those subnets. In most cases, if multicast is not working, probably the subnet broadcast will also not work because it is dependent on how your network is configured. But no need to worry. We have a third method which will work in any case, the direct method. And you can enter the client by using its IP or its host name. So if the client is using a static IP address, you can just add that client using the static IP address. If the client is using DHCP, then if you enter such client with IP address, then as long as that client retains the same IP address, you won't see any problem. But if the IP address of the client changes, then inside retrospect, basically you will see an error like 530 client was not found. or if the same IP address being assigned to a different client, you might see 525 wrong client found. So to avoid those issues, the simple thing is you can add such client using the host name. So anytime the IP address of the host name is changed, anytime RetroSec wants to connect to the client, it will first resolve the host name with DNS or the WINS name server. And so it will always know the latest IP of that client. Okay. So to summarize, with direct method, if you are using static IP addresses, doesn't matter how you add, whether you use IP address or host name. And if you are using dynamic IP addresses, add such client with the host name. And before you use that host name inside RetroSpec, make sure that the host computer can ping or reach the client computer using the host name. So simple test would be like you can open Windows command prompt and ping to the client using the host name. If that is working, if that name is getting resolved, that will also work inside RetroSpec. Okay, so those are the basic methods. There is one more question. What if we want to add multiple PCs at one go? ADS not supported. Active Directory services won't be helpful in this case, but if you want to add multiple users, the best option is to use multicast or the subnet broadcast method. RetroSpec uses port 497 and port 22024 for TCP and IP communications. Mostly, if you are working on a LAN, you will be dependent on port 497, TCP and UDP. And so how it works is that when the client boots up, it will start multicasting its own information. And if that packet reaches to the server, if the network allows that traffic, then you will get a list of the clients that are currently live on the network. So just like this list is here, I don't have any actual client live on the network. So we see this search pane empty, but you will see a list exactly like this. If there are any clients that are present, the client means the endpoints that have RetroSec client installed on them and they are up and running. So that's the live network. So in that case, you can select all the clients in one go and click on add button. If you have installed the client with using the password, then you can enter the password one time and then all the clients will be added in one single go. The same is true for subnet broadcast method. The only difference between these two is that this one will be limited to the single subnet, IP subnet, and this one will be able to communicate with different IP subnets. There is one more question. Will the user connect from WAN? Of course not. This is for the LAN network. The WAN users can be backed up using a feature called remote client backup, which we will talk about later on. But this window is specifically for the clients that are on your local network. It doesn't matter whether they are on Wi-Fi, wireless networks, or Ethernet. Everything is same. The rules are same for local LAN. So in any case, when you have added any client, then basically you might be presented with a client properties, which looks like this. You don't need to be worrying about here. All you can do is just click on the refresh button if you want to see how much speed you are getting for that client, although this is not necessary in order to set a backup or start protecting your endpoint. And there is one more question. Let me clear this list. I range already done. Done. And there is a question. So the RetroSpec is more for work group setup than domain environment? No, it has nothing to do with work group setup or domain. It is transparent to RetroSpec. We don't care as long as you have standard IP connectivity on your LAN. It doesn't matter whether you are using a domain name, whether you are using domain or work group environment. And so once you have added the client, then the next thing will be, so there are 3 simple steps to set up a RetroSpec backup. So I'll just bring up the other windows. And so there is a, the first step is to control your sources. what you want to protect. The next thing is where you want to save your backups. And the third item is to create a backup script and specify the backup interval or some other parameters of the backup. Okay, so we talked about the first step. Let's talk about the second step. And to choose, there seems to be one more question. Oh. Right, so there is a comment, what if the user is connecting from WAN? I'll be answering that question, Bangalore team. When we look at the remote client backup feature, and please try to use the question and answer window to post your questions. So there is one more question. What are the prerequisites to host retrospect server option? Yeah, we have an article there on the website. I'll be showing you that in a moment. So let me continue with the flow. And so right now we are setting up a test backup. So first thing is to set up our sources. The next thing is to set up our destination. So to create a backup set, I can click on the create new button here, and then I'm presented with multiple options here. So I can do, I can create or I can do backups to the multiple media types. I can do backup to tapes, I can do backup to disks, I can do backup to clouds in one single license. And so in this case, I'll be sticking to the disk backup set since I don't have tape available right now. But it's pretty same how you create the backup set. There are a few common parameters, and it will be pretty same as the disk backup set. Same goes for the cloud backup set also. And let me just comment on a new feature. For the ransomware protection, we have a immutable backups policy, and which is actually retrospect is leveraging on the feature provided by some backups, some cloud service providers, which is called object locking. And so it has been integrated with retrospect. So if you want to use that feature, there will be some prerequisite. You have to do some settings on the cloud account. And there are specific articles depending upon which service you are using. Inside the knowledge base section, there are different articles. So I'm not going to cover that. But the overview is that once you set up your account, while you are setting up your account, you can turn on this option, immutable retention policy, and then specify the number of days that you want to keep that data protected. How it works is that when you turn on the immutable retention policy, then whatever data is saved, that is locked, and it will not be changed. It is impossible to change or delete that data for that certain period, whatever you mention. So even if the malicious actor get access to your root credentials of the storage, they still can't delete that data or change that data. So it will always be there. Once the data is out of that window, then you can delete that data, or that is not no longer protected with the immutable backup or object locking feature. So in any case, you will be creating a backup set depending upon the storage media you will be using. So in this case, we will stick to the disk backup set. All types of disk backup set, the disk destination fall into the disk backup set, like NAS devices, RDX devices, any network shared location on another computer, that will all fall into the disk category. The rest of the three are pretty legacy option, and they have a lot of limitations. So it is not recommended to use these in today's network. The most common will be the top three that you will be ever using. So let's move with the disk backup set. And I can mention the name like my backup. And I want to be create it as a traditional backup set. I don't want to use the feature called storage group, which we will look at later. So I specify the name for the backup set. Then there was a question, I think it was related to the immutable retention policy period. Can we reduce the timeline? So yeah, you can adjust that number. By default, it is 180 days, but you can reduce that or increase that to your requirement. Yes. So after specifying the name for the backup set, the next thing is to specify where you want to save the backup. And for that, you have multiple options. If you have a NAS device or any other network location, you can browse that through Windows networking. You can also use advanced button to type in the full UNC path and directly access that resource. In this case, I'll stick to the local disk. So I'm gonna go to my D drive or any specific folder. The next thing you might want to do is to increase the use percentage. By default, whatever is available there, it will take that percentage, but it works better if you make it 99. You don't want to be restricting space from within retrospect. Whatever is available, let it use, and it is dynamically utilized. So next is the setting to turn on the encryption if you want. And these are all the options. As high as AES 256-bit encryption is available. And to enable that, you pick up the level of encryption, and then you confirm your password. And you can also have retrosec remember that password for scripted access. So when the backup runs, it won't be prompting or waiting for the password. The two things to remember about encryption. One is that once it is set, this setting is available only when you are creating the backup set. After the backup set is created, you can't alter the level of encryption or disable encryption. But it's not like you will be stuck with your chosen option. For example, if you have chosen not to use encryption and later on you want to use encryption, the simple way around would be to create a new backup set with required setting. Like earlier you were not using, now you want to use. So the new backup set is created with encryption, and then you can use retrosec transfer backup tool, which is in this tools section, to transfer the backup from the old unencrypted backup set to a encrypted backup set, and vice versa. If you have encrypted backup set and don't want to be using that anymore, you can transfer the data to an unencrypted backup set. The other thing to remember about encryption is this password is not recoverable. So you would want to be backing up that password somewhere. If you lose that password, we don't have any backdoor to recover that password for you, and that data will be permanently locked. And if the encryption is 256-bit, it is pretty difficult and in fact impossible to break that encryption. So this is particularly recommended for situations where, for example, if you are doing backups to cloud destination, and so your data travels through public internet, in those cases you would want to be using encryption. If you are transporting your backup inside portable device, like maybe a tape cartridge or detachable disk, in those cases also, if you want, you can use that. But in case of the NAS devices, your NAS devices are already protected with username and password, so that may not be required. But like I said, use it with caution. So there are a few more questions. Let me see if they are relevant here, or if I can address them later. Can we integrate third-party key management server to store encryption keys? No. So you cannot be integrating that. You will have to, you can use a third-party tool to remember your passwords and manage your password, but the retrospect application will not be talking to that third-party tool directly. There will be a user intervention required. So there is we can't recover only for 256-bit encryption. No, basically, see, the reason why we can't recover the password for any level of encryption is because we are saving that password with 256-bit encryption ourselves. Okay, doesn't matter which option you are using, everything that retrosec saves is saved if it's 256-bit encryption, and it is not possible to break that encryption and recover that password. And the reason we have not kept any backdoor is because if you keep a backdoor, then if you can access that, somebody else can access. So better to make sure it 100% sure that it cannot be breaked. There is no backdoor in the product. So moving forward, the next question is to let me just clear up some of the questions that are answered. The next question is, what would you like to do when your storage device gets full? And so the default action is to ask for the new disk. And so you will be presented with a media request window, and you can specify a second destination to continue your backups. That second destination will be added as the second member or whatever is the next member to the backup set, and backup will continue there incrementally. If you don't have a second destination, or if you want to stick to the same backup destination, the other thing you can do is you can remove the older backups to make room for the new backups. And for that, you have these two options. So with the middle option, you will have more granular control, like you can choose the number of exact copies that you want to keep, depending upon the storage space that is available to you. So let's say I have space for 3 copies only. And so I choose to keep 3 snapshots of every backup. Now, how it works is that as long as there is space available, Retrofit will go on keeping more than the 3 backup copies until the storage device actually gets full. When it is full, then the setting is triggered, and at that point, the excess copies are removed. Until that point, Retrofit uses all the space that is available there as long as it is possible. The other alternative is to use a policy-based grooming where it follows these 3 rules, and then you can choose the number of months to follow this policy for. And so depending upon your available storage space, you will be choosing one of these methods. This one will require more space because it will, even for 1 month, you will be end up with 11 to 14 snapshot. With this one, if you want to go below 10 snapshot, you have to use the middle option. Okay. You can also set this option later on in the backup set properties. So I'll leave it to the default. The next thing is where you want to save your catalog file. There is one more question. What is the backup policy for endpoints? I don't quite understand that question. If you can elaborate what you exactly mean by that question. The next thing we want to specify is where we want to save our catalog file. Every backup set will have a catalog file, which is an index file of the backup set. And every time Retrofit wants to do backup or wants to restore some file from the backup, this file will be referred. You can save it on the network also, but for performance reason, it may be better to save it on the local drive. And you can also create a backup to copy those files for additional copy. And even if you lost the file or if it is damaged, you can recreate the file from the scratch. So there are tools to repair the catalog or recreate the catalog if the entire catalog is lost. Is it first full and forever incremental? If yes, how will the retention work? What is the backup policy for endpoint? I think these maybe this is the alternate question for the other question. What is the backup policy for endpoints? And the user means to ask, is it first full backup forever incremental? If yes, how will the retention work? So I think what you are asking, I'll answer that question. We will finish the creating of backup set. We will go to the backup set properties, and then we have a summary tab which shows us where the catalog file is saved, how much of the space of that backup set is used, how much is available. And to answer your question, here is where you can set up the grooming option. And how it works is that if you are setting up the middle option, keep 3 backups, then when the first full backup happens, there will be 2 incremental backups. But if the recent snapshot, it means that most recent 3 snapshot will be kept. And I think, okay, I now understand what you are trying to ask. Maybe you are trying to ask that if the first backup is full and I'm keeping only last 3 backups, which are incremental, then will I be able to restore my entire backup? And yes, you will be able to restore your entire backup. The reason is how the grooming policy works is that when you say keep the last 3 copies, and even though last 3 backups were incremental backups, the snapshot that is created, we are talking about the snapshots here. So if you see, it says keep at least set number of last backups for each source. Okay, so if I'm backing up my C and D drive of the computer, then I will see 3 snapshot of C drive and 3 snapshot of D drive, which will be the most recent snapshot. And even if those snapshots were created during an incremental backup, they still point to the files that were present on the source when the snapshot was created. And if that file was backed up like 10 years ago, that file still is preserved. So that file will not be groomed by the grooming option. So if the snapshot is pointing to the file that was present on your drive, it doesn't matter when that file was backed up, and that file will be preserved. So answer is that you will be able to restore entire backup using your most recent snapshot. So no need to worry about, in fact, we don't have any concept like full backup and incremental backup. It does create a nature like it is a full backup and incremental backup, but in reality, we are always backing up what is missing to ensure we are backing up everything, and your most recent backup will be a full backup. And so the backup set is created. The third item is to create a script. But before that, let us use a immediate backup window to see the incremental backup in better details. So I go to backup and backup now. So this is the backup wizard. I prefer using the advanced mode. So anytime you want to switch, you can just click on the switch to advanced mode link here, and you are in the advanced mode. You get all the setting in one pane, and you have more granular control there. So I can choose my source, and my source could be my local computer where RetroSec console is installed. It could be any of my client or multiple clients if I want. It could be the single drive of any computer. So in this case, I'm choosing entire computer. Let me just clear off some of the questions. Yeah, and there was comment, can it support Oracle DB? Madan, I'll be answering that question if I can remember. Okay, I'll put it here. Try to use the question and answer window. And yes, we do support. Oh, sorry. So your question is about Oracle DB. We don't directly support Oracle databases. We support for the database backup. Currently, we support MS SQL databases, which is Microsoft SQL, and Microsoft Exchange databases. For Oracle, however, you can use a internal utility of Oracle to export the database into a flat file, and then you can use the RetroSec to back up that file. So there should be an article in the knowledge base section on that. But directly we do not support that. It's the same way you can use, you can protect several other databases. The feature is same. You will be using the internal utility to export the database into a flat file, and then RetroSec can be used for keeping backup of that file. Can we take backup based on content based like extension based? Yes, we can do that. That's selector settings. We will get to that. So I was talking about the selection of the source. So if I don't want to back up my entire computer, I can specify a single drive or few drives that I want to back up. And even it is possible to specify specific folders. If I don't want to back up entire drive, I can specify specific folders. Like in this case, I'll just define few folders, random folders, maybe as my sub volumes here. And then I can choose the volumes I want to back up, and only those will be my sources. There is one more question, Active Directory backup. So we don't actually separately backup Active Directory, but if you are doing a full backup of your C partition, then that covers your system state. So hopefully that will be helpful, but as a separate backup or restore, we are not backing up Active Directory component. So in this case, I'll just so let me just keep one single folder for sake of brevity. So after choosing the source, I can choose my destination. So in this case, we will use the newly created backup set for the demo. The next thing is to select the file selector settings. Default is to backup all files, means everything found inside that folder, whatever is source drive or folder, that all content will be backed up. And so answering to the question whether we can backup based on content based, like extension policy or extension based. Yeah, the user is asking whether we can back up particular files based on the extensions. Is there another question? Okay, we will be coming back to the questions. So we have multiple selector settings here. These are the predefined selectors here. And if I'm choosing all files, then everything is backed up. If I'm choosing documents, then only documents types of file will be backed up. If I'm choosing music, then only the music files will be backed up. So in this case, I'll first go with the all file selector, and then I can click on the preview button here, and that will show me the list of the files that are found inside the source folder. In this case, it's the Dell folder. And you can see all the files are marked. They have right check mark there. And that means that those files are selected for backup. I see the count, it is 72 files. And if I let this option, this backup go, there are few options also here. So in this case, if I do a normal backup, which means a incremental backup, if I do a recycle backup, that means I'm erasing my entire backup up to now, and I'm starting fresh as if the backup was never done. So the other option is to turn on the block level incremental backup. This has nothing to do with your incremental backup, irrespective of whether this option is turned on or off. The backup will always be incremental backup. The incremental backup means that your backup will, every backup session will back up only the files that are new or changed since the last backup action. And so, and then verification is also available after the backup is done. We also do verification to make sure that everything is written correctly, and we do a bit by bit comparison there. And additionally, you can turn on the software data compression feature also. So for this, okay, just a minute. Okay, sorry for the interruption. And so we were talking about the script options. And so let's go with the default setting here. If I continue this backup, then I see in the activity monitor window, but let me just try and stop this backup. If I can. I think we already backed up everything. It was pretty small backup. But if I go and see the history tab, so this is a activity monitor window, by the way. This question window is cluttering my screen, so let me just get rid of some of the questions. Okay, let me answer them later on. So this is the activity monitor window. You can launch it by clicking on the gear icon here, or you can launch it from going to report section, and then you have activity monitor window. This window has several tabs. The executing tab will show you all the ongoing activities, any restores, backups, or transfer, anything. And these entities are called execution unit, where you see not in use. So it is called execution unit. Depending upon the amount of RAM you have available on your backup server, you will have at most 16 execution unit. If you have 16 GB or more than 16 GB RAM, each execution unit will consume 1 GB of RAM. And with multiple execution units, you will be able to run concurrent backups or restores operations. And once the backup or any execution is completed, it will also leave an entry in the history tab, so you can later on revisit that. So now in this case, you can see this backup was stopped. So it says execution stopped by operator, but I also see that all the 72 files are completed backing up. So before I could stop that, all the files are backed up. And if I see the log, it says execution stopped by operator. All 72 files were being copied, and all 72 files are copied. The reason it says it does not show successfully is because the other phases of the backup are still remaining, like comparing and creating this, like the comparison part. So let me just try to add a single file or if I just go to, before that, let me just take advantage. Now, if I go back to the same setting again, let us say, remember the last few settings, and if I just click on the preview button now, you see that there are little diamond marks next to all the files here. And those diamond marks signifies that these files are already copied. And if I repeat this backup as it is, then basically nothing will get copied. It will be copying 0 files because everything is already copied. You can see here it says need to copy 0 files. And like I said, this is for the incremental backup. If you change that to recycle backup, which means I'm asking to erase all the backup and redo the backup, in that case, it should copy all the files. So instead of seeing need to copy 0 files, we will see need to copy all the files again. Okay, I'll switch back to the normal backup, and I'll just put a file inside the Dell folder, which is our source. Let me just create a random file. And so I have put a Word file in there, and let me come back here. And when we scan it again, okay, so we have to refresh the setting. Maybe I can trigger by changing the selectors. Getting back. Oh no. Okay, let me just cancel that and visit that, because it remembers the previously scanned settings. Now it will rescan and we will see the new result. So yeah, now you can see that there is only one file selected, even though all the files are marked. It will not be backing up all the files. Earlier there were 72 files, now there are 73 files, and this is the new file that was added. And you can see that file doesn't have the diamond mark next to that. So that signifies this is the new file. And that same will happen for any modified file. If the file is modified, then a fresh copy of that file will be made inside the backup. So if I now run this backup, it will only be backing up that one remaining file. You can see that it backed up one file only. So that's your incremental backup action. So copying one file only and completed copying one file. Okay, so that saves you a lot of time and storage space. So if you want to automate this backup action, you can also save your settings. So this was the immediate backup action, which means it will only execute when I click on the backup button here. But if I want this to automate, then I can click on the schedule button here, and then the settings will be saved in a script, a managed backup script, my backup. So now you can see settings are preserved, and there is an additional button here called schedule. So if I click on the schedule button, I can specify the frequency of my backup. There are different ways you can set up the frequency. The most common will be the day of the week, where you can choose the days when you want your backup to run. Like you can go alternate days, or you can choose all your working days, and then you choose the time when you want your backups to run. So right now it is 12:17. If I save it to 12:18 and click OK, click OK one more time, click OK one more time, this backup will still run. And I can see that here it says scheduled to run today at 12:18. The script name is my backup, doing a normal backup action and doing backup to the my backup set. So in few seconds, this backup will start executing. And the other way you can create your managed scripts is by going to configure section and going to scripts. And then you can see this script is just we created and it is saved here. If you don't want to go the way through, I mean, there are just different ways to schedule your script. You can go through the immediate backup window also, and you can see that the script has started executing. And it wasn't going to copy anything. It said 0 files copied. That is perfectly fine. And it reports it's successful because the execution was completed. It was allowed to complete, but it says 0 files copied because nothing was there to copy. You can see that it found 73 files. All files match for backing up based on the selector setting and need to copy 0 files. So the execution is reported completed. So you can create a script by going to configure scripts and then click on new, and you can create a backup script here. It could be my user backup, and the same settings can be then specified. Okay. There is another way of setting up the backup script, which is called proactive backup script. And the difference between the two is that, let us see my active backup. So let me just take both the windows. Okay. Oh, we closed earlier, so let me take that for the reference, right? So you have on the left, you have the managed script, and on the right hand side, you have the proactive backup script. You can see that most of the sources and fields are just the same, and they are actually same. The only difference is between the schedule. This one is a managed script where you specify the exact time when you want your backup to start. This one has an automatic logic. It has its certain rules that user cannot control. And so it is always active. It is polling the network, and anytime the source is live on the network and if its backup is pending, then it can do the backup. Now, when to use a managed script or when to use a proactive backup script? There are two key differences. One is that the managed script will only execute on a scheduled time, irrespective of whether the source is live or not. So if I'm doing backup of a network computer and I'm backing up at 12:18 and the backup computer was not live on the network, then this script will basically run and log the error 530 client was not found. Whereas this script will wait forever for hearing back from that client. And how it does it that when you create such script, Retrosect is polling the network. For example, if I just take, okay, not sure if I have anything in that, but let's try. And if I click OK, and if you go to the activity monitor, okay, maybe it is still open. So 1 minute, not this one. Right. So now you can see it is already executing that because it was the local source and we have only one source. But how it works is that any sources that you configure under the proactive backup script, they are listed in this tab, AI activity on the activity monitor window. And all the sources are chosen based on the polling results. The server constantly sends out small polling packets, and whoever responds to that packet, whoever backup clients respond to that packet, server knows that they are available for the backup. If their backup is pending, it will see if the execution unit is available, and if it is available, then it will start backing up that source. Once the source is backed up, the status is shown backed up. If the backup was interrupted during the backup, like the source was disconnected, maybe a laptop computer was there and it ran out of the Wi-Fi range, then this status will show retry. The backup didn't complete, it says retry, and after 30 minutes of inactivity, it will reattempt that backup. That doesn't happen in case of the managed script. So that doesn't happen in the case of the managed script. If the managed script fails, it will attempt the next backup attempt on the next schedule interval, whatever it may be, next day or whatever is the schedule. Opposite to that, this one will reattempt that if the backup was not successful. That is one difference. And second is you don't need to worry about the time when the live source is going to be live on the network. He can be live on the network anytime. And if its backup is pending, then the retrosec will attempt that backup. With this one, you can back up servers and desktop, which are more likely to be present on the network all the time or at a specific time. This is more suitable for laptop users who roam around the office and switch between the networks. So that may be useful there. So those were just two different ways of configuring your backup script. The waiting tab shows any scheduled script waiting for resource, like waiting for an execution unit, or if the source is being used by another script or destination is being used by another script. The event tab is not all that useful. It gives more information than you need. All you need, you can just access through the history tab, like this backup is successful. This one was also successful but didn't copy anything, and this one was stopped by the operator. You can also see the reports in the report section. If you go to reports and backup report, and then you have the backup report, and there are two formats. You can go with the standard format, which shows you just the errors and the destination and the script, or you can use the extended format, where it shows you the elapsed days since the last backup, any errors that occurred during the backup, or any warnings, how much time it took for the backup, how many files it backed up, and this change percent is a security reporting feature, where it will show you now when you back up any source for the first time, then it will report 100% here, because everything is just backed up. The next time the backup happens, and it will be an incremental backup under normal conditions. And so if I still see 100% there, it could indicate that those files are somehow changed. It could be a ransomware attack or any other malicious actor acting on the files. So all files are changed again. So this can indicate that you need to be paying attention to that. And the next is how much data is backed up, or how much performance you are getting, the destination of this backup and the script that did the backup. You can also export this report by right-clicking and export, and you can export it to the CSV file or TSV file that can be edited in Microsoft Excel or any other CSV editor. You can also have these files and the backup report emailed to you if you set up the email alerts. So if you go to configure section, go to preferences, and under notifications, you have email alert option. If you turn that on, you have to fill up the required information, give it a name, like which backup server is sending this report, specify the sender email account that will be used for sending the email. You can specify the multiple email addresses that should be receiving the email alert, specify the outgoing mail server for your from address, and then username and password for the account that is used as the from address. There is an article which describes everything in detail, so don't worry if you have any question about this. There is an article in the website. And then in the reporting part, you can turn on the specific events when you want the email alert be sent to you. So the options are: send me an alert if backup has failed or it is waiting for media request. Send me alert if backup is successful. Send me alert if retrosec is closed or is started. send me alert, send me backup report daily in the email body and as a separate file, and also send me a weekly backup report as a separate file. So those are some reporting options that we have. And there is also a, I'll split that into the second section maybe. So those are the reporting options. For addressing the question of the selectors, you can backup specific files if you create a custom selector. And the way you can do that is you click on the new button here, mention the name like my, okay, the name is taken, my choice maybe, okay. And you can see there are two sections for the selected. One is the include, one is the exclude. So I can use it in two ways. For example, if I don't want to back up certain extensions, certain files, and I want to back up everything else, then I can just mention that under the exclude area. If I want to back up anything specific files and I don't want to back up anything else, I mention that under the include area. So for example, if I add, I'm talking about the file, so always make your condition more specific. I'm talking about the file extension, so choose end with and like mp3. So with this statement, I'll be backing up only the files that have extension mp3. If I want to back up another file type, I can click on the last plus sign here, and then I add the second condition like .txt. And so I'm choosing to back up only two types of file. Everything else will not be backed up. If I reverse this condition, like if I bring that to the exclude section, then I'm telling retrospect. I didn't drop that. Okay. Right. So now if I'm telling retrospect not to back up mp3 and text file, back up everything else. Okay. And the include section will supersede the exclude. So if you want to create a selector, like I just don't want to back up something, but I want to back up everything else, then this is the way you do that. You just mention what you don't want to back up. You don't mention anything inside the include section. If you have any condition in there, that will be matched first. And then out of that result will be applied for the exclude condition will be applied to the result of that. And then you can click close and save that selector. And when you are creating your script, you can, for example, here we had used all files. So instead I can use my choice selector here. So I'll be excluding the mp3 and text file and back up everything else. So if I actually show you, you can see a preview how it works. So there were text files in that folder, Dell folder. So those files will be omitted. There were no mp3 files. So if I click preview, you can see that the folder has 73 files, but now 60 files are selected because the files that are omitted are the text files. You can see that those are not selected for the backup. Okay. So that is how the selectors work. I'm trying to cover all the basics that you will be requiring. For the database backups, how you set up the backup is same. The backup script is same. Your volumes will be different. For example, if I had a SQL or Exchange server running on this local computer or any network computer, I'll see that entry under that computer. And then I'll also have to ask Retrosec to utilize the license available for the database backup to back up that particular database in case I have multiple databases. So in that case, let's say this was my SQL backup server. I can right click that and click on licensing. And then I can use the available license for database backups for that particular. So it will be reducing one license from my available licenses for the database backups. So that there are different add-ons for the Exchange and SQL backups. Addition to your base application license, you can purchase that as a add-on license for SQL and Exchange backups. So once you use that, then how you set up the backup is same. You use a backup script. The destinations are same. You just point to the backup, the database server, and you can pick up any specific databases that you want to back up. and then that backup will be done. How you restore that backup is a little bit different than the file level backup. So for restoring the database backup, you go to restore and go to the restore database wizard here, and you choose the snapshot of that database to be restored. In case of the file level backup, we follow the restore wizard here, and which we will be seeing at, which is missing. So let me just take a look at the question list here before I proceed. Inside the question is, what are the prerequisites to host RetroSec server option? There is a article on the website inside the knowledge base section. There is a whole section on system requirements. So you can just review that or drop me an email. I'll be happy to show you that article, but it is detailed information. I'm trying to avoid answering that because if I just give an overall description, which is just a rough description, but there is more. So I'll recommend that you read that article. But just to satisfy your curiosity, it's nothing much. You just need a Intel Core processor, multi-core processor. You need about 4 GB of minimum RAM, or if you want to run multiple parallel executions, then you need additional 1 GB RAM per execution. You also need enough disk space, 10 to 15 GB of free disk space, a temporary disk space on the backup server for each concurrent execution. And there are some other few specific things mentioned. So just be sure to read the system requirement knowledge base article. Can we send backup to Google Drive also? Yes. So like I said, when we were setting up the we didn't actually set up, but we were seeing how to set up the cloud backup. So we have multiple options here. So if you want to use Google Cloud Storage, you have that option. Same way you can use Microsoft Azure, Wasabi, Dropbox, and Blackbase. Anything that is not missing, it's not limited to this list only. There is a bunch of other services that are also supported. Those are basically Amazon S3 compatible. For those services, you will choose the Amazon S3 option from this drop down. Okay, and for each service that we support, we have a separate article in the website. You will get all the information that you need for your service provider. Just be sure to check in the list of the supported cloud destination that your service provider is among the listed and supported cloud destination for RetroSec. So that question is answered. Let me see, can we take backup based on content based? Oh, we already did that. Why RetroSec than other leading backup solutions? What are the key factors we should think about RetroSec? I'm not actually aware of what the others are offering. I can answer anything that you ask about the RetroSec, but I can highlight you a few things like generally for different features, whatever I have been able to see, you are forced to utilize or purchase different license for every feature that you want to use. In RetroSec, we are offering you all the features in single license, under single license, like for the tape backups, it is included in the license. You don't need to purchase it separately. In fact, all this destination, they are not supported by many backup tools that are available. And we are offering that under same license and with a very convenient way. The other part is still remaining the same, so it doesn't add in complexity. Whereas you can utilize any storage media by just choosing how you create your backup set. And then we also have disaster recovery, by the way, that I just forgot. So inside the restore section, if you follow this wizard, disaster recovery wizard, if you go follow this wizard, you will have to install Windows ADK image first. And once you have that installed on the backup server, then it will allow you to move forward through this wizard. And there are just a couple of questions like whether you want to create 32-bit disk or 64-bit disk, whether you want to write it as an ISO file or you want to create it on a thumb drive, USB thumb drive. And once you are done with the process, you have a, let's say you created a disk. And so that disk works as a bootable tool in case the computer has a boot failure, like the hard disk has crashed, you can boot the computer from that disk, and then it will allow you to either boot that computer in one of the disaster recovery mode. Like if we are restoring a client computer, we will use the mode called restore as a client. And then you can just add the client. There are some specific methods. There are also newly added video tutorials in the tutorial section. So let me just bring up that, and also it will help the other question of the. I'll have to switch my screen. So if you can see my browser window, you can see that I am at retrosec.com/support. And on this page, I have different sections here. So if I go to the tutorial sections, I have the video tutorial for every single task that we perform in Retrosec. There are several tutorials, and there are also newly added disaster recovery tutorials. So you are welcome to see that. It has all the details you need. And there is also a knowledge base section here, and there is also a documentation which has the user guide and few other items. And the knowledge base section has the specific articles like I was referring to, the system requirement page. It looks like, yeah, okay, it is back. And so for the email alert troubleshooting, like you have the article here, how you set up your email alert settings and what settings you need to be specifying there based on your email service provider. This is the same page that we saw. Everything is explained in great detail. Then you have, that also brings me to the topic I skipped, how to set up remote client backup. So we should be addressing that. I'll not actually be going to demonstrate that because I don't have any remote backup client, but it's pretty simple. What you do inside the console is pretty much same. In fact, everything is same. The only way is, the only two differences is how you have to do some settings on the server side to the network, and you have to install client using a specific method, which is to use public and private key pair and create a custom installer to install that client. So everything is explained in great details here. You can just refer to this article. If you have any questions, just drop me an email at vishal@retrosec.com. I'll be happy to help you. And to give you an overlook of what this is, on the server side network, what you do, you configure your layer 3 device that connects you to public internet. You configure that device to do a port forwarding for port 497 and port 22024 to your Retrosec backup server. And on the client side, you specify the client a public IP address for the public backup server. And so when the client boots up, it will first try to contact the local server. If it doesn't find it there, it will start sending a request to public backup server. That request reaches your layer 3 device. It will forward that to the backup server, and server will establish a connection on port 497 and hold on to that connection. So inside the, so I'll have to go back to the console to explain the other thing, but let me just see if anything else I want to show. No. So if I go back inside the console, the way that remote client backups work is that that remote client will be automatically added when you follow all the steps inside the article. The client will be automatically added here. You don't need to go here. In fact, you can't do that because this belongs to your local network only. That client will be automatically added, and you can see under volumes, if you go to source groups, there is a tag called remote backup clients. So if any remote client is requesting for connection, that will be entered under this tag here. So if you see any client here, that means that's a remote client. Once it is added, it will also be listed in the list. And how you set up the backup is same. You create a separate backup set for that client. You create a script for that client. Although you will not be using the managed script here, you will be restricted to using proactive script for the remote client backups. The article talks about that limitation also. or the requirement instead of saying that as a limitation. It is a better thing to use that proactive backup for such clients. So let me just get back to the Q&A window, and we are yet to see the restore. If I'm missing out anything, or if you want me to go over anything, please drop that in the Q&A section. And now I'm answering a few of the questions, and then we will see the restore part. Or let us see the restore part first, and then we will move towards the concluding session. And to restore the backup, I follow the restore wizard, go to restore section, go to restore, and I follow the restore wizard. Click next. The first question is which backup set I want to restore from. So my backup is in my backup set. I choose that and click next. Next, it offers me different snapshots. Anytime I have done backup to that backup set, it created a snapshot. So based on the date and time, I can choose the snapshot that is likely to have the file or the version of the file that I want to be restoring. So if you remember that we backed up the folder first 72 files, and the last backup done was backing up just one single file. One of these backup did just one single file, and one of them did nothing. So to answer that retention policy question, if I restore back from the latest, which is actually an incremental, I'll still be able to restore my entire backup from that source. So the next option is whether I want to restore back to the original location. If I'm restoring back to a client, and suppose client is already crashed, I can choose to restore to a new location. It could be any network location, different client, or any drive of the local computer. So in this case, I'll just create a folder here for test restore, and I define that. Selected, click next, go with the default option, restore files and folders. Click select files, and I see all the files. So this is referring to the snapshot. Okay, this has nothing to do with how many files are backed up during which session. It is just a snapshot taken at a particular date and time. Snapshot is just like a picture of your source volume. It shows how your source was on a particular point in time. So if I want to restore everything, I can select and I can restore all 73 files. I can also do a smart restore or granular restore. I can select the specific files that I want to restore. I can select any folders. So in this case, I selected, let's say, 5 files and 1 folder comprising total 9 files. I click OK. I click next, go with the default option, not to replace if the destination has version of the newer version of the same file. It also gives me summary whether the destination has enough space to complete this restore. Instead of starting the restore and then point me or prompt me that the destination is full, it pre-scans and tells me that destination has enough space to complete this restore. And then I can click start. Pretty small restore, so finished very quickly, but it also leaves it utilizes the execution unit. So you see the live activity here, and it also leaves entry in the history tab. So if you want to revisit, it says execution completed successfully, 9 files were restored. Okay, so if I go okay, let me just move to the file explorer, go to my C drive. The restore folder was test restore, and I'll also have to switch screen. So here you go, and you can see that I'm at C drive test restore folder, and these are the files that we restored, 5 files and plus 1 folder. Total it should be 9 files, and if I check, they are 9 files. Okay, so that is how the restore works. So that will be pretty much the gist of retrospect. Let me just go over the list to make sure if I can include anything else. So those are the pretty common things that you need to start with retrospect. And now coming back to the questions. So there is one question in the chat. If I'm working on an Excel file which is already backed up after changing the file data, can it re-back up the file? It is already backed up after changing the file data. Yes, that file will be backed up, but it will be backed up on the scheduled interval, not when immediately the file is changed. That functionality is not for the backup software. That you are talking about a clustering environment that stays in sync. If you change the file immediately, it is replicated to the other node. But for the backup, it will be executed on a periodic interval. Let's say you are running that every hour, and whatever changes are made during that hour, when the backup is done, the newer version of file will have all the changes since the last version. But you have to save that file, yeah. And the important thing to understand here is that we are, or any backup software is backing a file from the disk and not from your RAM. So anytime you are working on a file, you are actually working in RAM. So unless you have saved that file, those changes are not committed to disk. And so any copy that is copied from the disk will not have those changes. So you have to save that file. Anything that you have saved will get copied. I'm closing the chat window, coming back to the question and A window. Okay, we already answered this question. Does it support deduplication? Yes, that is by default enabled. Anytime the backup starts, if you are backing up multiple sources to same destination and those sources contain the same kind of file, not kind of file, but basically the same copies of the file, then only one copy of that file will be placed into the backup. And for the other copies, we will just create a memory pointer, and we will not create a second copy of the same file. While restoring in the log, you will see that all the files are copied. The snapshot will show that all the files are copied. And when you are restoring, all the files will be restored. But in reality, in the storage, we will just have one copy of that file, even though it is shown under different snapshot of different sources. And so this one is done. If I am working, I already answered that. Can I support over VPN? Can it support over VPN? Basically, it applies to the same thing. Like you are connecting over WAN, and if you are better to use the remote client backup scenario instead of connecting over the VPN. However, it is possible. We don't. The software will not restrict you if the client is over the VPN. In fact, the VPN will be transparent to the software. It will not know that whether the client is actually on the live local network or whether it is connecting via VPN. The purpose of the VPN is to make a remote client part of your local network. And so the software will not be aware of that underlying structure. However, over the VPN, it may be happening that the ports may be blocked. So you will have to make sure that traffic on the port 497 is allowed for TCP and UDP traffic. And in that case, the client can be connected via VPN, and we will not see any difference there. But inside the retrospect, you will just see it as another LAN client. Whatever is happening with the VPN is outside retrospect domain. If I'm working on, I think I already answered that. There is another question. Please show us to destination backup format. Okay, Chetan. Thanks for reminding. So if I go to the G drive, go to the storage destination, and our backup was my backup, right? So let me also switch my screen. There is another chat. If ransomware attacks in immutable backup, what will happen, right? So the immutable backup, there is a question if ransomware attacks in immutable backup, what will happen? So the immutable backup feature itself is designed for counter the ransomware attacks, where the ransomware particularly gain access to your cloud destination. The idea for the using cloud destination is to have an offsite copy. So if one location is affected, your copy is sitting at the remote location. But the ransomware nowadays, what they do is they first attack your cloud destination and then destroy your original copy. So, and for that reason only immutable backup is designed. So once you save any copy with the immutable backup, even the user himself, the owner of the file, will not be able to change that file or delete that file for the set retention period. The file will be available for edit only after the retention period is expired. There is one more question. I'll come back to that, but first let me show you how to how it looks like on the storage side. So if I go to my D drive storage retrosec folder, I see my backup set folder, my backup, and inside I have the member folder, and it indicates 1. So it means it's the first member of my backup set. So if I go inside that backup set folder, I see 2 types of file. There are RDB files, which are the user backup files. These contain your backed up data. And there are session files, which is metadata. So this is the retrosec proprietary format .rdb. You won't be able to read what is inside these files. You can see that every file can grow up to 600 megabytes. And then we start writing the next file. So your data is chopped into pieces, into chunks, and saved or repacked into RDB files. So in order to see what is inside this file, you have to use retrosec restore to see or restore that data. So that also provides you additional security, like you are not using encryption, but no one can see what is inside that file directly. However, don't be mistaken about the file format and the encryption. Encryption, the file format is not equivalent of encryption. So anytime you actually have requirement for encrypting, use the encryption. Don't rely on the just file format changes. So that is shown. If we save the file, we are actually a bit overrun. So I'll take just a few more questions and then we can conclude in 5 minutes. If anything is left, or if you get a question later on, feel free to send me an email at vishal@retrosec.com. So the question here is, if we save the file after making the change in it, then how much the minimum time we can set to save backup of the file, or can we do, or we can do at the same time after saving the file? Basically, it doesn't matter. If you just save the file 1 second ago, you can run the backup the next second and the file will be backed up. The practical challenge doing that is that you cannot have a frequency less than 1 hour. The lowest frequency you can set for your backup is 1 hour interval. And in most cases, that will also be overkill and may not be practically possible, because if you have a larger amount of data, your first session lasts more than an hour. So by the time your second session is supposed to be starting, your first session has not finished. So even though you might want to run every hour, but it may not be feasible to run backup every hour. So, and that has physical limitations of your, how much data you have, how much performance you are getting, whether your data is coming from over the network, whether it is saved over the network. All those factors will contribute to the performance, and that will decide which will be the more feasible frequency for you. Backup recovery system data, backup recovery system data 3 years. I don't quite understand, but I think you're talking about retention period. So let me see if I'm still inside console. Okay, let me go back to console. And you can set the retention period to 3 years, if you want, you can just use this policy based grooming, and then you can increase the number of months beyond 12 to match your requirement. So like for 2 years, I can make it 22, 24, or likewise. So whatever you can fit into 2-digit, I think you can save it for that amount of time. Do you support mass deployment? Directly, we do not have the tool from within Retrospect, but there are third-party applications like Desktop Central, or even you can use the Windows deployment tools that utilizes MSI installer, and for that we have the MSI installer inside the installation package, so you can use that. But that will be outside the regular functioning of Retrospect. So you will have to use third-party tools. There are plenty of them. And right, so I'm done with the questions. I hope I answered all of the questions. If anything is remaining, please send me an email. And so we are concluding this session. I would like to thank you all for joining this session. It was really a wonderful session. We will be covering some more topics in the next session in next month or so. If anything is missing, or if you want to go over something again, like I said, just contact me on email. And so I conclude this session, and thank you all for joining. Have a nice day. Bye.